as I mentioned, you are a member of the Bush family as wife to George P. Bush. How did you both meet?
Well, we actually met in law school. He sat behind me in class, and little known fact, we were opposing counsel in a mock trial. So we and we still debate to this day who won the mock trial. So we were competitive. We were competitive from the beginning.
Did you have the same political values right off the bat? Did you talk about that? I'm sure that came up.
Sure. Well, I wasn't a political person, of course, aware of politics from a young age, but
Hmm.
certainly not politically involved. I grew up in a small town in West Texas, and so I like to believe I had West Texas Republican values. But certainly, dating George P. was my first foray into a political family.
What do you think makes your partnership work so well?
I think mutual respect and admiration for each other. We're truly best friends. We enjoy spending time together. We've spent more time together this during this pandemic than we have over the last few years because of travel and otherwise.
Hmm.
But just a general admiration for each other. Laughter helps. Try and not take ourselves too seriously. He reminds me of that.
And you have so many similar interests in those two wonderful little boys as well.
That's right. We actually our first date was on the golf course, and so we love to play golf together. We love to be outdoors. We try and get the boys outside as much as we can. Our boys are 5 and 7, so they have quite a bit of
Hmm.
energy. So anytime we can get them outdoors, that's helpful for everybody.
And you're really amazing that you do all you do so well. What do you think George and Barbara Bush would have thought of the 2020 election?
Well, I think that they would have loved the number of people that turned out to vote. We had an incredible number of just, voter turnout, and I think they would have been
Hmm.
very proud of that. I think they, would love to see the country come together one way or another after the legal proceedings play out. And support the
Hmm.
eventual president. But I think they really
Hmm.
would have been proud of the number of people who came out, and I think Barbara Bush would be very proud of the number of Republican women who were elected in 2020.
Absolutely, that was really something. And if you had to characterize what it's like to be a woman, a young woman in the Bush family, how would you characterize that?
Well, I think I obviously come from a long line of strong women in the Bush family. Barbara Bush, of course, the enforcer, who was the glue that held the family together. But she was such a huge representation of strong women, but then also hard work and dedication, service to others. Laura Bush as well. All of the Bush family members, but she really allows you to be yourself, and to she taught us to service to others, but be true to yourself. And I think she'd be very proud of all that her grandchildren have accomplished. So many of her grandchildren have been dedicated to public service, whether that's
Mhm.
in nonprofit roles, creating nonprofit roles, or even just giving back to their community. And that's something that she instilled from a very early age.
Mhm. And you would probably consider that as part of the values you learned. I think you already had them before you joined the family, but you just all seem to embrace so many of the same values.
That's right. That's right. Service to others in whatever capacity that may be, political, it may be nonprofit
Hmm.
work, or it may be just service to
Yeah.
others in your small community.
Hmm. Exactly. What really troubles you that the mainstream media are unaware of when it comes to conservatism in this country? I mean, I think you can open any number of glossy magazines or even just family oriented magazines, and you rarely see pictures of conservative women. Does that bother you at all?
It does, and especially young conservative women. It really
Hmm.
does bother me. I think 2020 has shown that um, women have an incredible voice, a unique opportunity, a unique perspective, and I think that it is certainly we're doing more, but there is certainly more that can be done.
When we come back, what the future looks like for conservative women in this country. Amanda, I want to speak to you about women winning big in the GOP. Although we've made headway, what does the future look like for conservative women?
Well, I think that's right. I think in 2020, we were able to triple the number of women elected to Congress from 2018, which is incredible. I think we went from somewhere around 16 or 18 to 35 in just 2 years' time. So I think women are taking a more prominent role, which I think is terrific. I think the future, I hope that that trend will continue. I think conservative women are getting more involved in their communities, getting more involved at the local and state level, considering running for office. And I would just continue to encourage young conservative women to get involved, understand the issues, join groups, and potentially run for office.
And so you mentioned issues, and I think that's one of the most important, the prioritizing of issues. What does that look like to you?
Well, I think realizing that so many of the conservative values that we hold, faith, family, community involvement, liberty, those things are really at the root core of so many of women's issues. And I think realizing where your politicians stand on those issues is very important.
Hmm. How did you feel about the process with Amy Coney Barrett? Did you feel that she was treated fairly in the media? Did you feel that what is your opinion about that?
Well, I was disappointed in the way that she was portrayed as not being able to be both a successful jurist and working mom,
Hmm.
because that's just flat out wrong.
Hmm.
And I think, she's obviously very well qualified, but she testified that it wasn't always easy, that it was a
Hmm.
struggle at times to be both a working mom and a, very powerful jurist. And I think that highlighted the difficulty that so many women have, that you don't necessarily have to choose. It's not an either or proposition. It's not
Hmm.
easy, but it's certainly doable. And she's incredibly well qualified to
Hmm.
be on the Supreme Court. So I was happy to see her join the highest court, and I think she'll be a role model for many women.
Well, I think you actually share a lot of the same qualities, a certain demeanor, restraint, and on the other hand, portraying a strong set of values and being a leader. And as you point out, some of those things aren't easy. What about the mainstream media? How do we work together to get them to be more focused on the women who are working so hard on the Republican side and their ability to bring our country together?
Well, I think you said it. We've got to work together. I think
Hmm.
2020 will be a great start. The number of congressional women, Republican women, are going to be leading by example. I think Amy Coney Barrett will be a great example. There are CEOs, women rising to the ranks of CEOs in businesses, and so I really do think that we are starting to make headway. There, like I said, there's still more work to be done, but these are great examples, and I really look forward to watching this trend over the next year.
It seems like it really is a bit of a challenge for both sides of the aisle to work together with the squad and all of that going on. I, like you, certainly hope that the strengths of these young women can demonstrate how that's possible for everybody to work together and really get some important things done in the country.
I hope so too. I think 2020 has certainly been an interesting year. So I'm looking forward to watching 2021, and hope that they can get some things done.
If you were First Lady, what would you suggest would be some of the top priorities? What would you be doing or thinking about?
Well, like you, I share a passion for cancer research.
Hmm.
I'm involved with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society and
Hmm.
the impact in particular on children. I think education, something that George's grandmother was always very passionate about, was literacy. But I think education Has been incredibly mind opening for so many in 2020 as parents had to get involved in remote learning and distant learning. And it's really been a mind opening um, pandemic from an education standpoint, what works, what doesn't work, how we can provide better education and resources to our children.
How do you feel about the schools now? Do you think it's better to have them open? Some states, yes, some states, no, but still, we're having a controversy about it. How do you feel about that?
Well, we personally are in a hybrid model with one of our children, and then
Hmm.
an in person with another child. And I will say that my child who is in person in school is thriving, I would say, more than the child who is in the remote learning, because the back and forth is difficult. The at home learning, they just aren't able to engage, especially as young
Hmm.
boys, in the way that they can in school. It
Hmm.
seems that most of the reports are that the coronavirus is not spread as much with young children. And so to the extent that we can get them in school, stay in school, and do so safely, then I think that's the way we need to go.
So, Amanda, we have a vaccine coming into our lives soon, hopefully. Are you going to be taking the vaccine? Are you going to help suggest other people should? How do you feel about that?
I would encourage people to take it. I think, by the time it's available to George and me, as far as our age, is will probably be a little
Hmm.
while. Obviously the healthcare workers, the essential workers, and then our older population, need to get it first. But
Hmm.
I would encourage people to take it, and I think George's uncle even volunteered with President Obama and President Clinton to take it, in public.
When we come back, Amanda's take on the role of a first lady. We're back, and I want to go on record that I think Amanda Bush could be an outstanding first lady. Amanda, it's a tough job. Both Laura and Barbara Bush have been in that role, and I must fully disclose I was fortunate enough to work with both of them as they were FLOTUS. So I just wonder how you would approach a job like that. I mean, you know so much about it, and how you would shape that and think of it. And of course, with your great family history, it would be just amazing.
Well, like you said, I've had two of the probably best role models in my family, and to be able to watch them and what they've did while First Lady, you have such an incredible platform that I think you really should choose issues that are important to you. Literacy was always incredibly important to George's grandmother. Um,
Mm-hmm.
with Laura, literacy and education as well. They did so much for AIDS in Africa and the girls' um, education in the Middle East, which I know you're aware of. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think just picking, things that are very important to you about which you're passionate, because you do have an incredible platform and stage to highlight those areas.
I was lucky enough to work with both Bush administrations, George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, and of course with both First Ladies. And I saw the imprint they put on the United States in their ways. And Barbara was so good, as you point out, with education and all of her initiatives. And then Laura also with education and women's health and women's issues. And it was a great pleasure to go with them to Africa on a few occasions and do all the great work that President Bush embraced with PEPFAR. And of course, you've seen it with your own father-in-law and all the great things he's done as former governor and governor of the state of Florida. So you've got it all around you.
I do. I have some great role models, both the men and women in the Bush family, and it's been a joy to watch them pick issues and highlight issues that they're passionate about.
So every first lady, of course, gets a lot of criticism, no matter what. And why I'm always, I don't know, surprised when I hear it, because it's not an elected office. It is indeed a big commitment for a wife and a partner to make.
That's right. I think if there's a story that Laura tells about how she, when she got married to Uncle George, he told her she would never have to give a speech, and the next thing you knew, several weeks later, I think it was. She was giving her first speech, and then, never, I think she imagined that she would be the first lady of the state of Texas, let alone the United States. So it's definitely not something that you sign up to do, but I think she embraced the role and did so beautifully.
And I know they would all be and are very proud of what you're doing because it is embracing the role. It truly is. And I think so much of what a first lady can do and does do is not even recognized. It's a very important role, and you certainly seem up to the mark. And how would you feel? How do you think your children would feel about them? They're young now, but how would they like to live in Washington?
Oh, well, and sadly, they haven't been to Washington yet. We
Oh,
we
right.
we're planning to go this year when
Oh, that.
pandemic went.
You know, Amanda, it's interesting as history goes. Now I can remember the politics so well, but both H.W. Bush and George W. Bush had issues with their predecessors and the people who they were working with and against. And yet these years later, they all became very good friends. George H.W. Bush became very friendly. President Bush with Bill Clinton. They used to do projects together, and I remember being on the panel of one of that they had done together after a hurricane. And then with President George W. Bush and the Obamas, of course, and now they work together very closely on issues. I think there's a lot to be learned from this. And how would you approach it if that were your role tomorrow?
Well, sure. Well, I think it takes some time. They weren't best
Hmm.
friends overnight, certainly. But I think things like a hurricane or any sort of natural disaster, anytime the country is facing a problem, you will see the presidents come together despite their
Hmm.
prior differences. And so I think over time, I hope that that will happen. But like I said,
Hmm.
it doesn't happen overnight, and it often takes something like a natural disaster, sadly,
Hmm.
or something like that to bring presidents together. It's definitely a club, so to speak, that very few are members of, and so I think they can really relate to the struggles, that they go through.
Do you think in history this pandemic will end up actually bringing people closer together, or do you think it will continue to divide us?
I think it will bring people closer together. I think people are realizing the simple things that matter, the connections, the things that we often took for granted, a year
Hmm.
ago, getting to see people, have dinner over the table with friends or family and being
Hmm.
able to connect. So I think after we come out of this, I think it will bring people together. I think people will be yearning to get back together and be able to have civil conversations. So I certainly hope so.
Amanda, I want to wish you and George P. and the entire Bush family, including your wonderful little boys, a great, great holiday, a lot of rest and time to enjoy your family. And let's hope we all get through this pandemic together, get vaccinated, and move forward. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Nancy. Same to you.